The Trump administration planning a new mission to target cartels in Mexico. This is all according to 4 current and former U.S. officials familiar with that effort.
So after recent incursions at the U.S. southern border, America's military is going to do something about this. Gearing up for a new operation that could soon see U.S. troops cross the border into Mexico for the first time in a long time, as they raid cartel compounds, doing the work Mexico's government refuses to do. Meanwhile, the organized criminals hiding in Mexico are doing everything they can to sneak themselves back into our country while they still can.
This would be primarily U.S. military, specifically from Joint Special Operations Command, combined with CIA intelligence officers. So the mission itself, it would be largely the U.S. military and these intelligence officials using drones to target cartel members, cartel leadership.
But when you said it's a message to Sheinbaum, who is the president of Mexico, do you think she doesn't have control over these cartels?
No, absolutely not. She has zero control over any of these cartels, and they're embedded all the way up into the highest levels of her government.
Yeah, they're only increasing in their capabilities and their sophistication, and they're actually weaponizing their drones as well. We've been reporting on this for months, for years. The criminal cartels are actually strapping bombs onto drones, and they use them against rival cartels.
If the cartels are starting to use drones, I don't want to scare people, but could you imagine a pickup truck full of 100 drones sitting on the approach corridor at Fort Lauderdale International Airport?
And some of those operations could entail the United States military being on the ground in Mexico to carry those out.
Here it is. Border drone incursions from these cartels. It's forcing the United States to act for the first time. But what nobody's talking about is when President Trump got elected, the border, it got shut down in a way these criminal organizations never expected, which has brought us to the point where we are today. A point where these criminals who were making $13 billion a year smuggling untold numbers of illegal immigrants into our country are pulling out all the stops to try and create pathways back in once again, bringing these cartels to the brink of open warfare with the greatest military in the entire world who could wipe them out with the press of a button. But they don't think that's gonna happen because it's never happened before. And for decades, these guys have had a safe haven in Mexico, which for some reason hasn't figured out how to stop them. And right now they're turning things up a notch, which is why we're seeing increasingly bizarre attempts from these folks to sneak across the border, including recent seaborne attempts in broad daylight at a time when President Trump's made it clear nobody should be floating around on a boat, revealing the desperate lengths these criminals are going to in order to try and keep their empire afloat before it collapses. Which brings us to the real reason the United States may soon do something big. This recent shutdown at the El Paso airport, which took place because of drone-related activity at the border, it's forced America to enter a new phase in the war at the border. And as you're about to see, we're on the cusp of witnessing an offensive in Mexican territory that hasn't happened in centuries. And while analysts say this latest cartel incursion amounts to an invasion by a hostile military force, everyone knows these things only happen because that hostile force has a safe haven in Mexico, where they're outflanking their own authorities who can arrest them, yes, but only seem to do so under international pressure for the news cameras, while never seeming to arrest enough cartel members to end these organizations once and for all. And look at what some folks are now doing to try and sneak across the most secure border in U.S. history. So here we got something very interesting. We've got some folks who are sneaking across the border, but these are actually illegal aliens dressed up as construction workers. Look at them hiding on the side of the road, sneaking up, and here they go. Look at that. They've walked across the border. They're now in the country, and they look like they belong in this environment because of their disguises. However, this is all being monitored by Border Patrol, and this little plan these guys came up with did not work because they were caught and apprehended. And shockingly, these aren't just land incursions we're talking about. We got people coming across on boats right now.
Hey! Hey! Manos! Manos arriba! He's going.
Okay, question on what was the position of the international.
What's wild about this is the idea of being in a small boat like that right now when you got the U.S. military all over the Caribbean. That's incredibly dangerous, but these cartels, they're selling that opportunity to their customers who they're going to sneak into the country with a massive debt hanging over their head that they're going to have to work off for years in some counterfeit version of the American dream. This is frightening stuff. It really is. But as you're about to see, the recent drone activity and orders from cartel members that their underlings shouldn't be afraid to confront U.S. law enforcement, this has the United States changing up how it secures the border. And all these little games that are being played by these criminals, well, they're about to come to an end.
Okay, ground stopped at 0630 for how long?
10 days.
So the airport's totally closed?
Drones used by cartels has been an ongoing problem along the border, but the AP is now reporting that a new laser was used by the government to bring down those cartel drones. And last-minute concerns over commercial flights in the area sparked the shutdown. Let's get out to News Nation's Allie Bradley, who is live in Texas with the very latest.
So, a laser weapon was used to down drones near an airport at the U.S. border. This is big, and it shows that the United States is taking seriously the threat of a technological invasion. You can't have gang members and criminals flying these things over our border without anything being done about it. What are they using these things for? They're using them to guide criminals who want to sneak into the country. They can see all of where the Border Patrol and the military assets are. They can monitor patrols, and they're helping people navigate into the country without permission. This is a massive disaster. Plus, these things are also weapons. They've changed battlefields across the world, and these cartels use them on each other in less than peaceful ways, which is frightening.
As well, we've been reporting on this for months, for years here at News Nation. So the criminal cartels are actually strapping bombs onto drones, and they use them against rival cartels. This is happening mostly on the other side of the border. The drones they're using, they're even bigger than those little ones that you or I would use as well. At one point, they were using French agricultural drones to carry heavier loads like explosives. Now, the cartels are also reportedly using devices to interrupt or scramble devices on the U.S. side that are tracking the criminal organization's movements. And we're not talking about just a handful here. We're talking about a lot of drones, Nicole, because a top general actually testified to the Senate last year that they're seeing 1,000 drone incursions from the Mexican cartels each and every month down here at the southern border.
1,000 drone incursions a month? That's an invasion, folks. Doesn't matter if the drones are robots. They're being piloted by people hiding right on the other side of the border wall, right behind Allie Bradley. And this is getting absolutely zero attention from the mainstream media in this country because it totally goes against the idea that illegal immigration is some sympathetic thing America should be open to because it actually makes our country better, when the very people coordinating it are criminals who do not want to help anyone but themselves. And if you were under the impression that the border was just, a few people here and there wearing construction vests, no big deal, not a massive thing. Look, a few years ago, the border was exploited in a massive way. And now we're learning that the people who did that took all the money that they earned and armed themselves, which has been an absolute disaster for the wonderful people of Mexico who aren't gang members or criminals. Look at this. Just recently, Border Patrol captured Mexican cartel scouts operating on the U.S. side of the border. These folks entered the country illegally, but they've got the money and power to do this and the territory to help them do it, all of which has been stolen from our country and from Mexico. The law-abiding do not benefit from this on either side of the border. And the fact that this is still happening in 2026 is the reason Mexico's president is now on notice.
Well, Dana, that's a message sent to President Sheinbaum. President Trump said, sit on these cartels, we're going to do it for you. So I think that was a shot across the bow to Mexico. If you don't get your house in order, we're going to do it for you. Dana, as you alluded to, the last time I saw a message like this, a notice to airmen using deadly force in airspace, was on September 12th.
Wow.
This is bad. There's a great Tom Clancy movie, Clear and Present Danger, where the Ronald Reagan-like president said these cartels represent a clear and present danger to the United States.
A clear and present danger to the United States. That's exactly what this is. And you know something? When these cartels are a clear and present danger to each other and to the people in Mexico, and to their own government, which is never able to suppress them and stamp these guys out. There's no amount of law enforcement over there that can ever seem to get rid of them. It makes sense that they would also be a problem for Americans. But you know what? Some Americans who think the open border is a wonderful, great thing and have been brainwashed into believing that don't believe any of this stuff. They don't even want to hear about these drones. They think this is all fake news. These are people who would see these construction workers sneaking across the border and then do everything they can to stop the federal government from arresting them. We don't even know who these individuals are. We don't know their background. All we know is that they were able to get across the most secure border in U.S. history with the help of human smugglers. On top of that, whenever Mexico has some operation and they go out, arrest a bunch of cartel people, and they ship them off to the United States so they can be prosecuted, how do you think those people got taken down? These cartels have been a few steps ahead of their government for a long time. They've got operatives throughout the entire government. You better believe that when tanks are rolling down the street to try and find these guys, that those in charge already know what's going to happen, and anybody who's still hanging out there is supposed to get captured on purpose so that everybody can save face and so that these organizations can survive for another 10 years.
American citizens. Dana, last year, do you remember when Ukraine snuck some 18-wheelers into Russia or built some like fake houses near air bases? Somebody pressed a button on their cell phone, the roofs opened up, and they took out 25% of that bomber fleet. If the cartels are starting to use drones, I don't want to scare people, but could you imagine a pickup truck full of 100 drones sitting on the approach corridor at Fort Lauderdale International Airport and flying those drones up into the flight path of an aircraft?
What do we always hear from advocates of an open border? We always hear from them, they say, oh, well, you know, the people who want to shut the border, the people who say that there's gang members and criminals out there, they're just trying to scare everybody. We have no credible information that gang members are exploiting this thing. Fear is one thing, but being proactive about the future is another. If you got a country to defend and you're aware of how these things are being used in other parts of the world to cause chaos, the last thing you want to do is to allow an operation like that to possibly set itself up just on the other side of the U.S. border here. And it's not just Mexican cartels who are operating in this territory. We just saw how Venezuela was home to Hezbollah, an Iranian paramilitary organization operating right there in their country in South America. We got criminals from all over the world who don't like us. Foreign actors from all over the place that would love to do something to hurt America. And you know who's going to help them do it? Cartels that have allegiance to no one but themselves. This territory over here, this is a huge red flag. And it's a good thing the United States finally started taking this seriously.
Eric, on the Hudson, we've seen what birds can do to the intake of engines. What do you think drones can do? So this is big, and we really need to get a handle on this.
Also, just a quick comment, if you would, on drones are relatively cheap to produce.
Correct. Absolutely. Look at warfare's changed in Ukraine, Dana. You can strap a small warhead on a drone and take out a multi-million-dollar tank, for example. So we need to wake up to what's going on. Good on the Army Air Defense folks at Fort Bliss who took down a bunch of these drones. Our young men and women on the tip of the spear. But we're worried about wars going on around the world, Dana. We got to worry about what's going on our own border.
And if we don't, who do you think's going to take advantage of that opportunity? You can't be complacent and sit on your hands and say, well, we have no credible information. You can't act like that forever before something happens. And in hindsight, you're saying, oh, gee, the warning signs were everywhere. Oh, this was an intelligence failure of the highest magnitude. And somebody should be like, we don't want to have these conversations. You need to be proactive when it comes to your country's border. And you got to remember that when the border was wide open, these guys were making $13 billion a year. They were able to power up and solidify themselves and arm themselves in a way that they never really were before. You give all of this money, you give billions to criminals. Don't be surprised if those criminals turn into a small army, take over territory in Mexico, become more powerful than their own military. But the U.S. military isn't the only tool the Trump administration has to get Mexico to stop empowering America's adversaries.
Mexico's tariffs of up to 50% on Chinese products are good news for this shoe factory in León. They say they've long been undercut by Chinese competition.
Wow.
This problem affects all types of companies, small, medium, family-run, artisanal, so I think we'll all benefit.
But is that the real reason that Mexico slapped tariffs on the Asian superpower? Analysts say it has more to do with pressure from next door, the United States.
So Mexico just put 50% tariffs on China. And as we just heard from a local shoe factory in Mexico, China has been ripping off Mexico with the help of the Mexican government because they didn't have any barriers to Chinese products entering that economy and putting local shops out of business. But with Trump saying, hey, look, you better play ball. You better stop letting your country be exploited, because what happens is these goods come into China and then they make their way into the United States, getting around various sanctions, getting around the tariffs the United States is trying to put on. Well, now that there are tariffs in Mexico, local businesses in Mexico are finally getting relief from unfair competitive practices that have been destroying the local economy here. And who was benefiting from that? The government was benefiting from that. Criminals benefit from it too, by the way. If the cartels are the only groups in Mexico that can get ahead because local businesses can't survive and nobody can survive, nobody can make money, what do you think's going to happen? Who do you think's going to end up running this place? The same people that run it today. So these tariffs that Mexico just put in on China, under pressure from the United States, obviously, this is another thing that's going to be good for the law-abiding everywhere and the people in Mexico.
President Trump's long worried that the country is a backdoor for Chinese goods to get into the North American Free Trade Zone, which Mexico shares with the US and Canada.
Eliminating
the country has
tariffs.
been under pressure to do something about it, although President Sheinbaum denied its appeasement.
We have great respect for China and very good relations with them. The reason for these adjustments to the law has to do with strengthening the national economy.
Right, yeah, 50% tariff is not an adjustment. That is a visceral reaction from an external force. And you know something? I feel bad for the Mexican government, because the Mexican government, even though they're in league with the cartels and even though they've been doing things that are helping China and we're helping Venezuela, I feel bad for them because they are a direct representation of how powerless the people of that country are. Think about this for a second. All the Mexican government can do is appease these cartel organizations. That's why they still exist. That's why they have territory all over the place. That's why there are maps of Mexico that look like what I'm showing you on the screen right now. This is what appeasement looks like. And you know something? A 50% tariff on China, is that appeasement for the United States? Yeah, it is. But guess what? A 0% tariff on China that allows China to come in and put local Mexican businesses out of business, that's appeasement in the other direction. This country, its people have been impoverished, they've been taken advantage of, and they are getting blown around by the wind because nothing in Mexico benefits the common people there. An open border doesn't benefit them. A U.S. lax attitude towards these criminal organizations doesn't benefit them at all. Things could get much better in Mexico in the near future if the United States acts. What do you think about that? I'll see you in the next video.